The philosophy of paper cuts. Nietzsche believed that small, repeated psychological injuries are more destructive than major events. What does not kill me makes me stronger, but only if it is acknowledged. A paper cut never announces itself like a blade. It doesn't arrive with violence or noise. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't warn you. It simply happens quietly while you are holding something you trusted, something you believed was harmless, something you believed was meant to help you. And maybe that is the lesson hidden inside its thin cruelty. Because the deepest wounds in life are rarely delivered by enemies. They come from things we allow close. Some thinkers once noticed that life rarely wounds us with disasters, but with repetition. With things so small we feel embarrassed admitting they hurt. They saw that the mind breaks, not under explosions, but under erosion, that quiet, daily scratches shape who we become more than any single tragedy. Others observed that suffering does not need a villain. Pain does not require intention. The universe does not aim at us, it merely passes through us, indifferent, careless, efficient. And then there were those who understood something even harder to accept, that the most unbearable wounds come from what feels ordinary, necessary, familiar, from habits we don't question, from people we don't suspect, from objects that were once alive, once whole, now flattened into usefulness. They believed wisdom wasn't hidden in distant stars or grand theories, but in the way we eat, touch, wait, and bleed in silence. That philosophy lives not in shouting truths, but in noticing the thin moments we overlook, because sometimes what hurts us most is not the depth of the wound, but how quietly it enters our life. Paper doesn't scream when it cuts you. It smiles by remaining ordinary, and the blood only appears after you realize something is wrong. That is how certain people wound us too. Not with hatred, not with open cruelty, but with familiarity, with softness, with words that sound like care, with intentions that feel clean on the surface. A paper cut hurts more than a deep wound because it confuses the mind. You look at it and think, this shouldn't hurt. You question yourself before you blame the paper. You wonder if you're overreacting, and so you bleed quietly, holding the very thing that harmed you, wondering why it feels wrong to let go. Paper cuts are not accidents. They are reminders. They remind us that softness is not the same as safety, that gentleness can still be sharp, that silence does not mean kindness. Some people hurt you not because they are cruel, but because they are thin, brittle, unresolved, and unfinished inside. Like paper, they were once part of something alive, a tree, a beginning, a source of growth. But they were processed, flattened, stripped, reshaped until they became useful, acceptable, productive. And in that transformation, something natural was lost. When they cut you, it is not always revenge. Sometimes it is inheritance. Pain passed down quietly, sharpened by pressure. A paper cut doesn't take effort. That is what makes it terrifying. The universe does not need to summon storms or collapse stars to hurt you. Sometimes it only needs a moment of carelessness, a small edge, a thin line, a reminder that destruction does not always require force. And maybe that is why paper cuts linger in the mind longer than they should, because they whisper a dangerous truth. If something this small can hurt me this much, what else am I underestimating? Paper is patient. It waits for contact. It does not chase you. It does not raise its voice. It lets you come to it. And when it cuts you, it doesn't stay to watch. It lets you blame yourself. This is how emotional wounds behave. The most toxic people rarely look toxic. They look necessary, helpful, supportive. They say they care. They say they're only telling the truth. They say it's for your own good. And when you bleed, they remain clean, untouched, still useful to others. A paper cut is a lesson in boundaries. It teaches you that closeness without awareness is dangerous, that not everything you hold deserves your grip, that usefulness does not equal trustworthiness. And yet, despite knowing this, we keep touching paper with bare hands. We keep loving without armor. We keep believing that because something looks harmless, it must be. Because the human mind is wired for hope. We are more afraid of loneliness than pain. So we accept small wounds if they mean staying connected. There is something almost poetic about how paper cuts heal. Slowly, annoyingly. They reopen when you forget about them. They burn when touched by water. They punish you for pretending they're gone. Emotional wounds behave the same way. They resurface during quiet moments, in pauses, in memories, in trust offered too soon. They sting not because they are deep, but because they are unresolved. Because they were dismissed when they first appeared. And maybe paper cuts are not acts of cruelty at all. Maybe they are warnings written in sensation. Messages from the ordinary world saying, pay attention. Saying, respect the small things. Saying, do not mistake familiarity for safety. Saying, not everything that feels light is harmless. If the pen is mightier than the sword, then paper is the battlefield. It holds stories, contracts, promises, apologies, lies, and truths. It carries words that build nations and words that break hearts. And sometimes it reminds us through a thin red line that words can wound deeper than weapons, especially when delivered softly. A paper cut is proof that pain does not need permission, that harm does not require intention, that love without awareness can still injure. And perhaps the final philosophy of paper cuts is this: life does not always break us loudly. Sometimes it leaves marks so small we feel foolish for noticing them. But those are the marks that teach us the most. Because they ask a quiet question, we can't escape. Why did I stay close to something that kept hurting me just because it didn't look dangerous? And once you understand that, you never hold paper the same way again.